The last thing I clearly remember, before everything went silent, was looking up through a shattered windshield at a black March sky and thinking, this might actually be it. Not as a panic, more as a quiet recognition. The kind of thought that arrives when all the noise has been stripped away and there's nothing left but the truth. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. My parents were decent, hard-working people who showed their love the way people of their generation showed everything. Through showing up, through working, through making sure their kids understood that life required something from you. My father was quiet and steady. My mother held the family together with a kind of patient strength I didn't fully appreciate until I had my own family and realized how hard it actually is. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling. We had what we needed and we worked for the rest. I was the kid shoveling snow for the entire neighborhood every winter, not because anyone forced me, but because that was just the expectation in our house. When things got tight economically, my father moved us to Southern California. He and my mother bought a gas station, and that's where I really grew up in terms of who I would become. I was in high school athletics during the day and closing down that station at 10 o'clock at night. I learned about engines, rebuilt motors from scratch, figured out how broken things could be made whole again. I didn't realize at the time that I'd spend decades living inside that metaphor. My automotive background shaped everything that followed. I worked my way up through the industry, national sales manager, then eventually vice president of operations for a company manufacturing parts for trucks and cars. Good, demanding work. I moved my family around the country several times as opportunities came. I was the kind of man who focused on what was in front of him, built what he was supposed to build, and didn't spend much time wondering whether there was anything beneath the surface of things. By the time of the accident, we were living in the Rocky Mountain states. My office was on one side of the mountain. Our home was on the other. I drove that pass every single day. The night it happened was in March, one of those early spring nights when it's warm enough during the afternoon to melt the snowpack, but cold enough by evening to turn that melt into something invisible and deadly on the road. I'd stayed late at the office. I was tired, but not unusually so. Just a man heading home on a road he knew. I came over a small rise and my headlights caught a deer standing directly in my lane. I turned hard left to go around it. The moment I turned the wheel back, the car didn't respond. The ice had full control. I was no longer driving. I was sliding, completely at the mercy of physics, and I knew in the fraction of a second before impact that there was nothing I could do. The semi-truck hit me just behind the driver's side front wheel. The collision cut through my vehicle from that point all the way to the right rear taillight. Everything on the left side was gone. My right knee slammed into the dashboard and drove the femoral head clean through my hip socket. My rib cage had over 300 fractures. I didn't know any of that at the time. What I knew was that I was on the floor of what remained of my car, and I could not move. My entire left side had stopped functioning. And then I felt it, that particular spreading numbness from the middle of my back downward. And I thought with a strange calm, I'm going to be paralyzed. I thought that was the worst thing that had happened to me. I didn't know yet that my spleen had been severely ruptured. I was bleeding out on a mountain road in the dark and the cold. People had stopped. I could hear voices. Someone had gone to a nearby farmhouse to call for help, but the nearest hospital was at least 35 minutes away. The cold was extraordinary, the kind that gets past your skin and straight into the center of your bones. I started shivering in a way that felt like my body was trying to shake itself apart. And then the pain came, and when it did, it was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Every breath was its own agony. I could feel myself growing weaker by the minute, and I understood in some still functioning part of me that the minutes were not on my side. I started to think about whether I was going to survive the night. I had been a man of certainty my whole adult life. I built things. I solved problems. I had a wife I loved and 3 young children and all the visible evidence of a life going according to plan. And in all that living and building, I had never really sat with the question of what comes after. I had heard things growing up, the way everyone hears things. But lying there on the floor of that ruined car, bleeding out in the cold, I had to be honest with myself for perhaps the first time. I didn't know. Nobody who was currently alive really knew. My mind went quiet. I started thinking about myself as a small boy. I could see my whole life laid out with a strange, aching clarity. From that kid in Utah all the way through to this moment, my wedding day, the faces of my children when they were born. 1,000 ordinary afternoons I had lived through without understanding they were gifts. I thought, I have lived a good life. I am genuinely grateful for this life. The pain started to ease. That surprised me. I expected it to get worse, but instead it softened, pulled back, and something warm spread through me like a heavy blanket being drawn up over my chest. I breathed in as much air as I could manage. My eyes closed. I don't know how to describe what came next in a way that fully translates. Language was built for this world, and what I'm about to tell you happened somewhere else. I was somewhere. That is the most accurate thing I can say. I pushed myself upright, and I was standing on a surface that seemed to extend in every direction without end, an infinite ground beneath an infinite sky. And that sky was unlike anything I had looked up at through my windshield. It was vaster than any sky I had ever seen. The Milky Way spread across it in full, brilliant detail. Billions of stars so clear and alive that they seemed less like objects in space and more like a presence, like something aware of me standing there. Then I became aware of beings in the distance, a group of them, luminous, radiating a white light that was both intensely bright and completely comfortable to look at. They weren't calling to me with a voice. It was more precise than that. An idea simply appeared in my mind, fully formed and clear, come toward us. The instant I accepted it, I was moving, not walking the way you walk here, but effortlessly, as if the space between us were folding itself away. When I reached them, they circled around me, and they held me in a way that went through the surface of things, that entered me and moved through every part of me at once. What I felt in that moment, I have spent many years looking for the right words. The words don't fully exist. It was love. But love the way a physicist talks about gravity, not a sentiment, a force, the actual substance of reality. I felt it fill me completely, and I understood, on a level that had nothing to do with thinking, that this was the most powerful thing in the universe, that everything, every single thing, was made of this, that I was made of this. Every worry I had carried dissolved instantly. The house we were selling, the next career move, the budget shortfall, all of it, gone. Not because those things were wrong, but because from where I was standing in that light, they were simply very, very small. And I thought, this is real. This is the actual reality. Everything else has been the preparation. I had the overwhelming sense of having come home, not to a place I remembered from this life, but to a place I had always known existed somewhere beneath the noise and the years. It was where I came from, and it was receiving me with complete acceptance, without any judgment, without any accounting of what I had or hadn't done. I understood then that I had a choice. I could stay. And I want to be honest with you, I considered it. Standing in that light, held by those beings, feeling that love move through me, the idea of returning to a broken and freezing body on a dark mountain road was not an easy thing to contemplate. There was no fear where I was, no pain, no uncertainty, no exhaustion from the constant effort of living. I felt that whatever came next from here would be more than fine, in a way my ordinary thinking mind could never quite reach. But then I thought about my children, 3 small faces I loved more than I had ever found words for. I thought about watching them grow up, about seeing who they would become, about the life ahead of them that I hadn't seen yet. And something in me, deep and strong and insistent, pulled. and I was rocketed back. There's no softer way to say it. Re-entering my body was violent and cold and full of an agony I hadn't felt even before I lost consciousness. It felt like pressing myself back into something too small and too damaged to hold me, and all the pain that had eased away came roaring back at once. I heard myself screaming. I opened my eyes and first responders were all around me, using the jaws of life to tear the door off what remained of my car, pulling back the roof so they could slide a backboard in. Every movement they made sent shock waves through me. They carried me to an ambulance and took me down the mountain. What I learned afterward was remarkable. This small local hospital had scheduled their very first trauma team meeting for that exact night. Every doctor on the team was already in the building when the call came in. All of them came out to receive me. I had a 3% chance of surviving the night. 3%. And those doctors stayed and worked on me for many hours. They were extraordinary people, and I have never stopped being grateful for them. I made it. But the man who came home from that hospital was not quite the same one who had driven over that pass. My wife noticed it almost immediately. My children noticed it. I started doing things differently in ways I couldn't always explain. I became a vegetarian. I changed how I spoke to people. The relentless forward urgency that had driven my professional life softened into something more deliberate and more present. I started working on myself from the inside out. It wasn't until years later, when I went back to school as an older student and someone showed a documentary about near-death experiences in class, that I finally had a name for what had happened to me. I had thought I was alone in it. I wasn't. There were others. The relief of that was something I hadn't known I needed. I began reading everything I could find. I studied Islam, Sufism, Buddhism. We moved to Colorado, where there was a rich spiritual community. Buddhist teachers, meditation centers, people who had spent their entire lives exploring exactly the questions I was only beginning to ask. I learned to sit still. I learned to listen in a different way. And slowly, imperfectly, I came to understand something I couldn't have articulated before that night on the mountain. God is not somewhere else. God is in everything. In the mountain, and in the ice, and in the deer that ran out in front of my headlights, and in the truck that hit me, and in the surgeon who kept me alive. God is in the love we feel for our children, and in the difficulty of the ordinary Tuesday afternoon. God is in the grief that breaks us open, and in the darkness that makes the light visible. All of it. Every single bit of it. We are not separate from each other. What feels like separation is just the limited view from inside a body, inside a lifespan, inside a set of daily concerns that feel very large when you're in the middle of them. But underneath it all, underneath the fear and the struggle and the loneliness, there is something that does not change, something that loves you completely and has never stopped. I know this because I was there. The struggle is not a mistake. It is the point. The darkness is what makes the light visible. The difficulty is what gives the good things their weight. You cannot know warmth without knowing cold. You cannot know love without knowing loss. Embrace this life with everything you have, knowing it is not all there is, but knowing also that it is something extraordinary and irreplaceable. I died on a mountain road in March and I came back, and I am grateful for both things. For the place I found when I left, and for the life I was given when I chose to return. Because now I know with complete certainty, we never really die. We go home. And home is filled with a love so complete that there are no words in any language large enough to hold it. But for now, while we are here, there is this life. There is each other. And that is more than enough.